Our lab studies the fading affect bias, which is a psychological phenomenon in which negative emotions fade more quickly than positive emotions. The FAB is positively related to healthy outcomes such as positive religious coping and spirituality, mature death attitudes, and self-esteem, and is negatively related to unhealthy outcomes such as dysphoria, trait anxiety, stress, and poor memory specificity. Social media is linked to unhealthy outcomes such as depression, attention deficits, loneliness, and fatigue. Given the relation of the FAB to depression and the positive relation of social media to unhealthy outcomes, we wanted to determine if across a diary study the FAB would be related to social media. First, we expected to find a robust FAB that would be greater for non-social media events compared to social media events. Specifically, we predicted a small FAB for social media events. We also expected the FAB to be related to memory measures. In line with previous research, we expected the FAB to be positively related to healthy outcomes and negatively related to unhealthy outcomes. We predicted that poor memory for unpleasant events should predict a large FAB, and that poor memory for pleasant events should predict a small FAB. Participants included 93 undergraduates from a small public liberal arts university in the southeastern United States seeking research credit. The participants' ages ranged from 18 to 22 years old, and they were predominantly female. The study was approved by the University Institutional Review Board, and participants were treated ethically according to the American Psychological Association guidelines, which included briefing, consent, and debriefing. Measures for the current study included the DASS to measure levels of depression, anxiety, and stress, the FAS to measure Facebook addiction, the IAT to assess internet addiction levels, the PANIS to determine participant affect at the time of testing, the PIUQ to assess problematic sleeping patterns, the GRIT scale to measure tenacity and grittiness in relation to long-term goals, and the RSES to determine levels of self-esteem. Also indicated on average how many hours per week they spend on social media and non-social media activities. The study materials also included free recall and recognition tests to serve as an objective memory measure. In the first of the two sessions, participants will be asked to read and sign a consent form and then will receive a packet of the aforementioned questionnaires. Then, over the next week, the participants will submit as many events through Google Forms as they can. For each event, participants will provide a title and a description and rate their initial and current emotions regarding the event on a scale from -3 to -3 being highly unpleasant and 3 being highly pleasant. Participants will then provide rehearsal ratings for how often they think about the event, how often they tell others about the event, and how often they both think about and tell others about the event on a scale from 0 to 6, with 0 being never or very infrequently, and 6 being very frequently. In the second session, which takes place 7 days after the first, the participant will complete a free recall and recognition test and report their current emotions regarding the event. Finally, participants will be given a debriefing form and be pressed to address any questions or concerns they may have. We expect that social media will negatively predict the FAB. Additionally, we predict a small FAB for social media events. We also expect the FAB to be related to memory measures. The results from Experiment 1 revealed that affect faded more for pleasant social media events than for unpleasant social media diary events, but this result was not statistically significant. This finding is rare for FAB research. The number of false recognitions, proportion of false recognition, and rehearsal frequency moderated the FAB in Experiment 1. Rehearsals were positively related to the FAB, and the FAB was reversed at high levels of false recognition, which is also an uncommon finding. Much like Experiment 1, Experiment 2 found a FAB for social media events and non-social media events, and this affect was significant for non-social media events. The first figure depicts fading affect for initial affect across quintile levels 10th through 90th of event rehearsal frequency for events for Experiment 1. The x-axis shows fading affect and the y-axis shows quintiles of rehearsal. We found a crossover reaction such that participants with high rehearsals demonstrated greater fading of negative than positive emotions, whereas participants with low rehearsals demonstrated greater fading of pleasant emotions than unpleasant emotions, which is unhealthy. Figure 2 depicts fading for initial events across quintile levels 10th through 90th of the number of false recognitions for experiment 1. The results are similar to the rehearsal results, such that participants with low levels of false recognitions experienced a healthy FAB, whereas participants with high levels of false alarms did not experience a healthy FAB. Figure 3 shows that the fading affect for initial event across quintile levels 10th through 90th of proportions of false recognitions to diary events for experiment 1. This graph shows the number of false alarms relative to the number of diary events participants recorded, and the results are largely similar to the results from Figure 2. Moving on to results from the current study. Figure 4 shows fading affect for initial event affect across initial event affect and event type, social media and social media, for experiment 2. Unpleasant affect faded faster than pleasant affect for social media and non-social media events, but the FAB was only significant for non-social media events. Figure 5 shows the fading affect for initial event affect across quintile levels 10 through 90th of event rehearsal frequency for experiment 2. This graph demonstrates that rehearsals are positively related to the FAB, as participants completing a large amount of social rehearsals experienced a larger FAB compared to participants not engaging in social rehearsals. Finally, figures 6 and 7 show the fading affect for initial event affect across quintile levels, 10th through 90th, of the number of total false recognitions for experiment 2. These results are similar to the rehearsal results. The number of total false recognitions and the proportion of false recognitions relative to the number of events recorded is negatively correlated to the FAB. As explained by the graphs, the FAB was significant for non-social media events, but not for social media events. In both studies, false memory was negatively related to the FAB, and rehearsals positively predicted the FAB. Rehearsals also aided the relations between false memories and the FAB. This study is the first time a relation is established between the FAB and any objective memory measures, and it was replicated for validity in experiment 2. These results support past research and extend the findings to the context of social media using diary methodology. Combined, these results suggest that social media use can negatively affect the processing of